You are standing at the edge of a massive cliff. But it's not made of rock or dirt. It's a cliff made entirely of logic. You look down over the edge into the abyss and it just goes on forever. There is no bottom.
Vertigo for the brain. It's a really unsettling feeling.
Exactly. And that is the feeling we are dealing with today. We're starting with the question that, it pushes everyone off that cliff. It keeps toddlers awake at night asking why. And honestly, it stumps 70-year-old philosophy professors just as often.
It really does. It is the question that sits at the very end of the line. It's the terminal station of curiosity, you could say.
If the universe has a creator, and let's just assume that premise is true for the sake of the argument, then who created the creator?
The ultimate regression. It's the classic turtle stacking problem, isn't it? If the world is resting on the back of a giant turtle, what is that turtle standing on?
Another turtle.
And then what's that turtle standing on? Does it just go turtles all the way down?
And honestly, today's deep dive it's a lot. We aren't just doing Theology 101 here. We are mixing astrophysics, probability theory, the mathematical definition of infinity, and some logic puzzles that feel like those brain teasers you get locked in an escape room with.
It is a fascinating mix. And what we are looking at today isn't just an abstract debate happening in, a dusty university hall between two guys in tweed jackets. This is a direct confrontation. It's between arguably the most famous atheist argument of the 21st century, from Richard Dawkins' bestseller, The God Delusion, and a sharp logic-based rebuttal provided by our source material today.
Right. Our source is a lecture by Engineer Muhammad Ali Mirza, and the vibe of this deep dive is really unique because we are going to go from talking about hurricanes destroying junkyards to the mathematical definition of a necessary being.
And finally, we're going to solve that annoying paradox that I know you love.
I've been waiting.
Can God create a rock so heavy he can't lift it?
I have been waiting to talk about that one since I was 12 years old and thought I was being so clever. But before we get to the heavy logic, give us the lay of the land. What are we actually looking at with this source?
So our primary source is a detailed transcript of a lecture titled, Who Created God? The speaker is responding directly to Chapter 4 of Dawkins' book. The mission of this deep dive really is to unpack how the speaker uses logic, math, and religious texts to answer that atheistic challenge regarding the origin of God.
And just a quick disclaimer for everyone listening, we are putting on our detective hats today. We're exploring the internal logic of the source material. We aren't here to preach, and we aren't here to convert anyone. We are just seeing how these two massive worldviews, materialism and theology, clash in this specific lecture.
Precisely. We're stripping the engine down to see how the gears turn. We want to see if the argument holds water on its own terms.
Yeah. Okay, so let's jump right into the deep end. The source starts with a really vivid image. The junkyard hurricane. I feel like I've heard this before in science classes, but break it down for us. What is this scenario?
It's a classic analogy, yeah. It's originally attributed to the astronomer Fred Hoyle, and the source uses it to establish a baseline for probability. It's all about setting the stage for what is and what isn't believable.
So paint the picture for me. What are we looking at?
Imagine a scrapyard, a huge one. It's a complete mess. Metal shards, wires, plastic rivets, old tires, broken glass, just absolute trash, total chaos.
Right.
And then a massive hurricane tears through the yard. The wind is howling, debris is flying everywhere. It's total kinetic chaos.
Yeah.
Pure entropy.
Okay, total destruction.
Right. Now the hurricane passes, the wind dies down, you walk into that junkyard. And the question is, what are the odds that the wind has accidentally, purely by chance, assembled all that trash into a fully functional, fueled up, ready to fly Boeing 747?
I mean, zero. It's not just unlikely, it's absurd. You wouldn't even check to see if the engines start. The thought wouldn't even cross your mind.
That's the reaction the source wants. He quotes Fred Hoyle arguing that the probability of life originating on Earth purely by chance, what we call abiogenesis, is no greater than the chance of that hurricane assembling the 747.
That is a staggering comparison because a 747 is just metal and plastic. It's inert. It's dead matter.
Exactly. A 747 is complex, sure. It takes millions of parts, thousands of engineers, and refined manufacturing. But the source argues that a single living cell is infinitely more complex than a jet. A cell has, digital code in the DNA. It has power plants, the mitochondria. It has waste disposal systems, self-repair mechanisms.
And a 747 doesn't heal itself if you scratch the wing.
No.
It doesn't reproduce and make baby 747s.
That's a key distinction. The source is highlighting that biological complexity is on a different tier entirely. It's a whole other level of organized information. So if you would believe a hurricane built a jet, why would you believe blind chance built a cell?
It's a powerful analogy.
The source even brings it down to a simpler level. He holds up a ballpoint pen during the lecture.
Just a standard pen.
Just a pen. He says, if I told you this plastic and ink just came together by themselves, you'd think I was crazy, and no one would argue with that.
So the baseline argument is complexity implies a designer. You see a design, you assume a designer. That seems like the standard teleological argument, right? The argument from design.
It is. It's a classic formulation of it. But here is the twist, and this is where Richard Dawkins enters the chat.
Because Dawkins doesn't disagree with the 747 analogy, does he? I mean, he's an evolutionary biologist. He knows how complex life is. He's not arguing that life is simple.
Not entirely, no. In The God Delusion, specifically Chapter 4, Dawkins addresses this head-on. He actually accepts the premise that complex things don't just pop into existence. He agrees that a 747 cannot be made by chance.
Okay, so where's the conflict? If they agree that complexity needs an explanation, aren't they on the same side? It sounds like they're starting from the same place.
You would think so. But Dawkins flips the argument on its head. This is what the source calls the Dawkins counterpunch, he says. Okay, let's say the universe and life are the Boeing 747. They're incredibly complex, so you say they need a creator.
Right. That follows the logic so far. A complex thing needs a creator.
Well, Dawkins argues any creator capable of designing such a complex universe must be even more complex than the universe itself. You can't have a simple being create a complex universe. To design a brain, you need a better brain. The designer has to be more sophisticated than the design.
Oh, I see where this is going. If the universe is a 747, God is the ultimate Boeing 747.
Correct, the superjet. And if your rule is complexity requires a creator, then you have trapped yourself. You've set your own trap. Because if God is complex, then God requires a creator.
And that creator would have to be even more complex.
And therefore requires a creator. And that creator requires a creator.
And down the rabbit hole we go. We are back to the turtles. It's turtles all the way down.
To what we call the infinite regress. Dawkins argues that by invoking God to explain complexity, you haven't explained anything. You've just moved the problem back one step and made it bigger.
It's like cleaning your room by shoving everything under the bed. You didn't clean it, you just hid the mess. It's still there.
That's Dawkins' view precisely. He thinks the God hypothesis is a cop-out that leads to an infinite chain of creators, which explains nothing. It just kicks the can down an endless road.
So the source presents this as a trap, a logical snare. If you say God made it, Dawkins says, who made God? How does the source get out of this? Because logically, if you accept the first premise, everything complex needs a creator, you kind of have to accept Dawkins' conclusion. It seems airtight.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The speaker, Engineer Mirza, doesn't treat this as some deep philosophical mystery. He treats it as a mathematical error on Dawkins' part.
A math error, like he forgot to carry the 1 or something.
A bit more fundamental than that. He calls this a factorial problem, or a fallacy of infinite regress. He argues that an infinite regress of creators is not just unlikely, it is mathematically and logically impossible. It simply cannot happen.
Walk me through that. Why is it impossible? Why can't we just have an infinite chain of creators? Why can't the universe just be an endless line of dominoes, stretching back forever?
Think of it like a chain of permissions. The source uses a military analogy that really clarifies this. Imagine a soldier, let's say a sniper on a ridge, wants to fire a gun.
Okay, he's locked on, ready to fire. Target in his sights.
Right, but he has strict orders.
Yeah.
He cannot fire until he gets permission from his commander.
Reasonable. Chain of command. Standard procedure.
So he radios the commander. But the commander says, I can't give permission until I ask the general. And the general says, I have to ask the president. And the president has to ask, let's say, the UN Security Council.
Okay. Bureaucracy at its finest. This is starting to sound familiar.
Now imagine this chain doesn't stop. Imagine there is an infinite line of people who have to give permission before the shot is fired. Person A needs permission from B, B from C, C from D, forever.
Does the gun ever get fired?
You tell me. If the chain never ends, do you ever reach the person who can just say yes, the person with the ultimate authority?
No, never, because everyone is waiting on the guy behind them. There's no starting point for the permission.
Exactly. The command never travels down the line because the line has no beginning. If the chain of dependencies is infinite, the action never occurs.
So applying this to the universe, if God was created by supergod, And supergod by ultragod.
If creator A was made by creator B and B by C, and this goes on forever, then existence itself would never fire. The universe would never happen. Nothing would ever come into being because the permission to exist would never arise.
But here's the reality check. We are here. The universe exists.
Right. The gun has been fired.
Right.
We exist. The universe is here. We are sitting here talking. That is the fundamental fact on the table.
So because we are here, the chain must have started somewhere. There has to be a beginning to the chain of permissions.
That is the logical necessity. The equation only works if you reach an entity that does not need permission, an entity that was not created, a stopping point.
The uncaused cause, the prime mover. I've heard those terms before.
Exactly. The source argues that Dawkins makes a category error. He assumes God is just another link in the chain, a created God. But the source defines the true God as the uncreated.
This is where he quotes the Quran, right, from that specific chapter.
Yes, Surah Al-Ikhlas. It's very short, just 4 verses, but he calls it the touchstone of theology. And the key line is, Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He neither begets nor is begotten.
Nor is begotten literally means was not born or was not created, so it's built right into the definition.
Precisely. The source is saying, Dawkins, your question, who created the uncreated, is a contradiction in terms. It's like asking, what does the color blue smell like? Or what is higher than the highest point? Or who is the married bachelor's wife?
So the argument is that the question itself is flawed. It's not a real question.
It's a flaw in the questioner's logic, not a flaw in the concept of God. The source is adamant. Mathematically, you must arrive at a number 1. You cannot have an infinite regression of zeros and expect to get a sum. If everything is a zero, meaning it has no power of its own and is dependent on something else, you never get a 1. You need a 1 to start the chain, an independent reality.
That's actually a really satisfying answer. It's clean, it stops the spinning in your head, it anchors the logic, but the source doesn't stop at math, does he? He pivots to something else, something more psychological.
Yes, and this is where the deep dive takes a turn into the spiritual. Because for the source, this question, who created God, isn't just a fun debate topic for a Friday night. It's a symptom.
A symptom of what? Lack of education or just curiosity?
No, a symptom of a spiritual attack. And this is a fascinating part of the lecture. The source mentions that this specific doubt was predicted in the Islamic tradition.
Predicted? Like recently by some scholar?
No, 1400 years ago. The source cites hadith literature, specifically from Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. For anyone listening, these are considered the most authentic records of the Prophet Muhammad's sayings in the Islamic tradition.
And what did the predictions say? What was foretold?
The Prophet Muhammad stated that a time would come when people would sit together and ask questions until they reached this specific one. This universe was created by Allah, but who created Allah?
That is wildly specific. It's not just a general people will doubt, it's people will ask this exact logic trap question.
It is. It's incredibly precise. And the source makes a really interesting point here. He says that reading Richard Dawkins didn't shake his faith at all. It actually validated it.
How so? Because Dawkins was playing the role the prophet predicted skeptics would play.
Exactly. For the speaker, the fact that a prominent 21st century intellectual is asking this exact question is proof of the prophet's foresight. It flips the script entirely. Instead of the question destroying the religion, the existence of the question confirms the religion.
That is a fascinating perspective. It's like 4D chess. You make a move to attack me, but I already wrote down that you would make that exact move 1,000 years ago. Your attack becomes my evidence.
It really is. But the source goes deeper into the mechanism of this question. He attributes this line of questioning to shaitan, Satan.
The whispers. I've heard this concept.
Yes, waswasa. The source describes it as a psychological process, a sort of mental infiltration. Satan comes to a person and starts a chain of logic. Who made this? Who made that? It seems rational at first. It feels like intellectual curiosity.
It feels like you're just being smart, right? Just following the evidence.
Right. But the goal isn't truth. The source argues the goal is to lead the mind to a logical cliff. Who made Allah? To induce confusion and despair. It's designed to crash your operating system with a question that can't be computed within its own framework.
So if this is a spiritual hack, a virus introduced into your thoughts, how do you patch the system? You can't just math your way out of a feeling of doubt, right? It's more than just logic at that point.
Logic is the shield. That's the infinite regress argument we just discussed. That's your intellectual defense. But the source prescribes a spiritual antidote. It's a 3-step process mentioned in the hadith for when this specific thought occurs.
Okay, hit me. What's the protocol?
Step 1, affirmation. The moment the thought comes, you say, Amantu billahi wa rusulihi, which means, I believe in Allah and his messengers. You anchor yourself. You don't let the thought destabilize you.
It's like a reboot. You reset to your baseline axioms before the virus can do any damage.
Exactly. Step 2. Recite Surah Al-Ikhlas. That's the chapter we mentioned before. God is one. He was not born. You remind yourself of the definition of the uncreated. You actively recall why the question is invalid from a logical standpoint.
Reinforce the firewall.
And step 3. Seek refuge. Basically, acknowledge that this thought is an external intrusion, a whisper, and cut it off. Stop the loop. Don't engage with the infinity. Disengage from the thought process because you know where it's designed to lead.
That's a very practical set of instructions. But I want to circle back to that phrase in step 1. I believe in Allah and his messengers. Why bring the messengers into a debate about astrophysics and logic? That seems like a detour from the main point.
It seems like it, but for the source, it's absolutely central. This is what he calls the argument from unity, or what I like to call the probability of prophets. This is his evidence that the uncreated creator isn't just a deistic force like a cosmic clockmaker, but a personal God who communicates with humanity.